welcome to the second episode of Straight Talks on Supply Chain, where we deep dive into the intricate world of logistics and sustainability. I am your host, Sudeshna Dikshit, and today's episode is all about the backbone of responsible business practices, the sustainable supply chain. As ethical business practices have become a greater and more immediate priority for businesses these days, compliance goals and sustainability benchmarks are also becoming now more standardized. Companies now have a much greater responsibility, ability, and obligation to demonstrate corporate social responsibility and also reaching the sustainable goals in their supply chains. In today's episode, we will explore how sustainable logistic and green supply chains are not just best practices but are also a necessity. We will talk to experts who are paving the way for a future where business thrive without compromising the planet. The episode promises a closer look at the customer centric approaches in this world of supply chain. So, buckle up for an insightful journey into the heart of sustainability in supply chain. Today, we have two amazing guests for the listeners. Our first guest today is known to everybody in the industry here is Nisreen El Kobai. Welcome to the podcast, Nisreen. Nisreen is a supply chain expert with 25 years of experience, known for the cost effective supply chains and project management within the biggest Middle East groups. She's an expert in network design and she has designed and managed heavy industry and retail online and offline supply chains by always remaining customer centric. I hope I did justice with your introduction. Our second guest today, also known to everyone in the infrastructure industry, is Nivesh Chaudhary. Nivesh is an infrastructure professional with over 15 years of management consulting experience across various infrastructure subsectors, with a primary focus on ports and maritime, logistics, shipping, and supply chain. So let's get started to know more about their experience, delve more into their knowledge, and have an insightful episode of Straight Talks on Supply Chain. So, welcome to the podcast, all of you. I hope I have introduced both of you well enough. So, how is it? How have all you been?
Thank you.
This Friday evening.
Perfect way to spend a Friday evening. Thank you, Sudeshna. Thank you for having me, and I'm very happy to be here.
Likewise. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We thought weekend should be ending the week on a sustainable note. So that's how this discussion is starting. So without wasting much time, let's just straight away get to some serious question. To both of you, since you both have been working in the supply chain industry for such a long time, and I would like to know, how have in your career, you have seen the landscape of sustainability develop over the period of time? If I may ask you, Nivesh.
Sure. Thanks for this question. Yeah. So what I've seen from my experience, limited experience in this industry, is that now sustainability is not an option anymore. People and companies are taking sustainability in their business practices, in their business plans. So this is something which has become a new normal. The big corporates who were driving the sustainability movement, now this has shifted or maybe has the other smaller companies have also started getting into it. So ESG, HSG, those things have become a new normal now. And this is something which is very interesting because this will drive the way we will function. Not only big corporates, not only smaller corporates, but also as an individual. Consumers are also more responsive in terms of ordering online, all those things. So I think this has changed a lot in the last few years. And I hope so that it will drive the way the industry will function.
Correct. Very true. Coming to you, Nisreen, how do you think it has had an impact on the corporate, if I may ask you specifically?
For the sustainable supply chain.
Correct.
Yeah. So, like I said, Nivesh said, it's not a choice anymore. There's only a one way direction. So, and we've seen, I mean, along the years, especially it started with CSR when before we started to less printing, less wasting paper, less using plastic, etc. So it started with CSR and then it became now more and more mandatory. So from a supply chain perspective, I always say that supply chain by nature has been always sustainable.
Correct.
In supply chain, from the beginning, there is what we call a circular supply chain or reverse logistics. And so we learned very early how to recycle, how to reuse, how to do. Now, yes, the material was not there. For example, we had too much plastic, or there was no EV in the 90s or something. But at least the thinking for someone in supply chain is how can I, when I drop my goods, how can I collect back, for example?
True.
So in supply chain, you already have that sense of how can I have a circular economy or how can I reuse, etc. So now the good news is we have more ways to do it. So that's the good news. We have more ways to do it. Companies are more open to say, okay, you can come and collect. Actually, they're happy, etc., etc. So there is more flexibility and more possibilities to have a sustainable supply chain. And again, you're absolutely right. Today, there is no more excuses. Out of 100 actions, you must take 2 or 3.
Correct.
Yeah, there's like it should be in your everyone 2024 goals in supply chain.
Correct. I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. This brings me to the basic learning which we had when we started our career in supply chain.
Yeah.
That is the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Correct.
Exactly.
So supply chain has already, I mean, sustainability has been there. It's just that the emphasis is more of it. Very, 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 very well pointed out. Thank you so much, Nisreen, for this insight. Nivesh, if I may ask you, while we are talking about sustainability in terms of environment, we are talking about governance, we are talking about being socially responsible, but at the same time, it should not be a case that it is a feel good factor. It should be something which is implemented, and on that aspect, I couldn't help but mention about the finance part. We talk about climate finance also, but I'll not delve more into that. That's not our expertise. But from you, I want to learn, rather, our listeners would like to know, how do you think that the balancing can happen? Cost effectiveness along with sustainable practices.
Yeah. Interesting. Now, when you look at supply chain sustainability, one thing is very important to understand that sustainability will not come in a short term. You always have to look at it in a long term basis, and when you look at long term, there would be some initial investment. Now, sustainable measures will come at a cost, but these costs will probably be a financial cost, not the economic cost. When you compare these two, there is a difference. Now, when you build something, you have to put in additional effort to make it sustainable, but that is something which will give you return. It's not that something which you are building in something at a cost. The return you will only be able to realize when you look at long term, as I said, and the long term investment will always pay you. No more the investments are looked at as a bubble. So when you look at bubbles will always be very, very short term. So good part about sustainability and the entire discussion, the topic of sustainability, and that is what excites me more, is that you always have to look at the bigger picture. How is going to span out? How is going to look at in the ecosystem? How is going to look at in the environment, in this
Correct.
in the world we live in?
Correct.
How this is being perceived in the consumers that we are dealing with, or the competitors. So that is the good part about it, and the cost is something which will be offset in the longer run.
Just taking a cue from this, looking at the bigger picture. Yes, this is no more a compromise. It is a responsibility towards Mother Earth, towards every living being on this planet, and taking the bigger picture into consideration. Optimization of cost, balancing of cost, that comes absolutely with a much more ease.
Yeah.
So, having understood this, how do you think, Nisreen, that might have an effect rather an impact, or you may say, is there any resistance, if I may put, from the consumer side, from the customer side? How would that be? What would be your thoughts on that?
Thank you for the question. And when we analyze, I mean, personally, and we look at how is the behavior, whether it's in Europe or here, or I feel and we see that the consumer has evolved faster than the corporate world.
Yeah.
We we look now at labels. We look what we're eating. We look what we are dressed with, what we are dressing up. We look at what we put in our bags, in for our children especially, etc. So we really pay attention now. We look, it's made in where, etc. So we are really now, I think, much more conscious. Of course, you cannot select everything, but like we are much more conscious. So when you look at, if we look at our beautiful region, the Middle East, the corporate world is way slower because it's such a big transformation. Middle East is living a lot of transformations at the same time.
Sure.
So first we need to implement the right processes and supply chain, etc. And then at the same time, how can they be sustainable? So it's a lot of things to absorb and to and to implement and to absorb. And you know, to transformation, you don't transform like that. It has a cycle, it has a way of learning curve, etc. So the and because the consumer in the Middle East is very special, because they come for the whole world, completely different. So some are super mature, some less, etc. But at the end, we are quite exigent. I feel we are quite demanding here in the region. So it puts the bar quite high for the corporate world, and which is good, because then we will hopefully will transform faster than the
Yeah.
you know the Western world, where they had 30 years to it. We will probably transform in 10 years or 7 years. So definitely and the thing is, there is no choice, so you have to go in. I just want to bounce on the cost thing. Same again, there is no choice, you have to do it. So what I tell, for example, to our customers is, don't wait to do everything at one shot, because it's going to be
Very well said.
very overwhelming
Yeah.
for you,
Absolutely.
for your teams, for your company. Not only on cost, on you can't do it simply. You know, you're a human being at the end. So I always say, start small, but start now.
Start now.
Start now.
Right.
Don't wait.
Don't
Just start now with small things, and at least 2024 you would have, you know, achieved this. 2025 this, etc. And put a plan on 5-6 years, but don't wait. The more you wait, the more you put yourself at risk there. Sorry for the long answer.
No, no,
No, no.
absolutely not. It's something which is so important for everyone to know, and I'm sure our listeners would be enjoying it, in the sense that one should know, one should understand. It's more of, I would take this discussion to a level of responsibility, as and you rightly mentioned, our the beautiful region of Middle East. It has been a pioneer in that, and the net zero initiative 2050, I shouldn't be, rather we shouldn't be forgetting that, the reducing the carbon footprints. We just have finished the COP 28, the green agenda 2030. So these are all the various endeavors by the government to ensure that it's not only the business, but commoners, the end users, the suppliers, at every aspect of the business, we are aligned.
And you know, if we look back, sorry, Sudesh, not to cut you out. If we look back, the things that has been implemented, that became a law. So today we have a choice still.
Correct.
At one point, there will be zero choice.
yeah.
So the earlier the companies change, the better for them, I think.
Absolutely. If you go on discussing it, there is no end to it. It's such an important and most precious topic for us. Just quickly on the, I want to ask Nivesh, how do you think even this, we talk about Industry 4. So how do we think that Industry 4 has evolved to Industry 5 now? When I say this, it's basically digitalization too. and human element. I think we had a very excellent meetup. I just happened to have attended, which also mentioned on that. So, how do you think the technology will foster this element, the
No,
sustainability?
technology is going to be an enabler for ESG. Now, when we look at ESG or sustainability, one thing which a lot of corporate struggle is how to measure sustainability, how to measure the impact of those interventions. Now, this is something which will come from the technology. This is something you would have to have, as Nasrin also mentioned, smaller steps would make big difference. Now, there are a lot of companies who are doing it and doing it at very different scales. I take an example of Ford. Now, Ford is manufacturing around 5 to 6 million car units in a year. Now, if you look at their production, at each and every step, they are trying to do something. I'm not saying, not comparing with them to anyone else. Everyone is trying to do something at their level, but now each and every step in the production, in the processing, in the transportation, you have to have some intervention. You have to have some unique way of doing it. You have to have some measures of sustainability in place, and that is only possible with the use of efficient use of technology. If we don't you do that, we probably may not be utilizing the entire potential. So that is very,
Correct.
very critical.
So, do you think that like if we talk about this, Nisreen, on one point which I would be very quickly, a very quick one pointer, while supply chain is not just about logistic and warehousing, it starts, where it starts from. So, from the procurement side, from the sourcing side, do you think that it would have an impact?
Yes, definitely. We see it post-COVID localization. So the consumer first wants to have his product made nearby
Mhm.
locally, and the companies they don't want to depend on freight or transportation, and the cost has been doing zigzags, and now what's happening in the Red Sea. But I think I think there is a big shift in terms of I wouldn't say it's the end of globalization. I wouldn't say that. We'll still exchange, but probably differently. Maybe some categories of product will be
Yeah.
local, some will continue to travel.
Yeah, just to add to Nesrine's point, in fact, I completely agree with her. And not only the consumer behavior, but also in the way the industry is behaving. From far shoring to near shoring is what
Yes,
we
also
are
absolutely. Yes.
experiencing. So in lot many terms, yes, that's happening. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Thank you so much. Since this discussion is getting more interesting, I think I'm having a lot of questions, but we need to cut it short. And so, before we end, a quick question to both of you. In your extensive experience, what exactly would be the suggestion that you would be giving across to the businesses who are embarking upon this sustainable journey? Nivesh, if you may start, and we can end with Nisreen. Yeah.
So one thing which I will like to pick the clue from, which I completely agree, and I'm glad that Nisreen also pointed out, do something, start. You start, don't wait for others to do and then you follow. And you don't have to follow the way the big corporates are doing. For the smaller companies also, there are a lot many ways the ESG or the sustainability can be ensured. So do something, imbibe those practices in your business plan. That is very, very important. Having a sustainable agenda will not help. It has to be in sync with your business objective. That's very important.
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. It has been a great discussion, and if we continue, we can discuss more and delve more into it. But I think our listeners have enjoyed this journey and hearing from our distinguished guests here. And having said that, this brings us to the end of this episode of our podcast. But before we conclude, we would like to proudly say that ASCELA as a company has been a member of the largest platform of corporate social responsibility. That means as a part of the UN Global Compact. And as a signatory of UN Global Compact, we wholeheartedly pledge to uphold the 10 principles. And along with ENY Consulting, our partner, we aim to create a very positive impact here. So, to all our loyal customers whose presence means the world to us and who have been patient enough to hear to us, hope you have enjoyed this conversation. And until the next one, this is Sudeshna Dikshit signing off. Thank you, both of us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.